your whole team, your livelihood as a professional recruiter and organization is you have certain job openings to work on, and your livelihood depends on how efficient you are in that and how effective. That's it. The tools you can use are either job boards or LinkedIn or different places, but those are sourcing tools. And if you have a centralized system with pre-built talent pools, you're not doing it reactively.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Kuehnle and Matt Chambers, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we have an amazing mic drop episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show. Sometimes we're going to have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are truly shaking up the space. They're going to teach you how to do something that they do that's helped them to be successful. Sometimes they're going to cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be very soon, and what those mean for them. Every Tuesday, we're going to drop a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Every now and then, we'll open it up for Q&A, where listeners can drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on. Send those over to us at podcast@loxodes.co. And every now and then, like today, you're going to hear a mic drop episode from Matt. He's going to share something that's been bouncing around in his head for a bit about the recruitment space and things that you really need to know about. So today, mic drop episode with Matt, and I can assure you it's one you are not going to want to skip. We all know there are tools galore in the recruiting space, but there is one that is truly the single most important piece in a modern recruiting stack, the recruiting CRM. Some of you may roll your eyes at this because it's the boring tool, but top recruiters today live and die by the recruiting CRM because it's what gives them such a big advantage over others. With that, Matt, let's jump right in. I know you've got some big thoughts here, so let's pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sam. And happy Friday, everybody. Before we get started and just jump right into the recruiting CRM, I think I want to talk about the way things have always been. And most people think that the recruiting CRM and ATS, it's one different platform, but largely very few people have a recruiting CRM. It's by far the most important platform that you can have and tool. And the reason why is most recruiters are using the same tools. They're using LinkedIn primarily for sourcing or job boards for post and pray. And ATS was actually set up just to screen applicants. And so the recruiting CRM, which almost nobody has or leverages, allows people to build talent pools and pipelines and basically go out and find your total addressable talent pool for your different specialism and be proactive and nurture those over time. And very few companies do that, especially in-house corporate. And that's pretty much the advantage that professional recruiting organizations have over in-house or companies that are not doing that. I think to speak to a couple specific examples as well, and why we know that this works so well is, everyone's looking for these new shiny tools. Like, what's a sexy tool that we can help be transformational in our recruiting process and to give us a big advantage? But there's no silver bullet in the recruitment process. And most recruiting professionals and companies that have been doing this for a long time, specializing in recruiting, they understand that. And they talk a lot about, the very best recruiting organizations talk about like best practices and things that we do. And they're not worried about, technology and automation. And they're right to a certain extent. Where I believe that this deviates and they're not getting as much performance as they should is that they're relying too much on the kind of old traditional ways without in combination using automation, and which is really your workflow. So the core of your whole entire process and workflow is the recruiting CRM. It's not the ATS. And there's very few. I've spoken to 7,000 plus organizations over the years, more than anyone on the planet. Most people don't know this, and this is why this is a topic today. On the agency side, and there's different nuances within that, you have the ATS/recruiting CRM, and even within that, you have your business development activities that you have to manage as well, right? So you're just bolting on too many systems. On the in-house corporate side, this is the biggest problem and gap. Everyone uses an ATS. They're frustrated. Their sources don't use their ATS because it doesn't work. And irregardless of segment, nobody uses their system because the search capabilities just are not functional. There's no utility. So this goes back to like modern recruiting CRM, why it's the core of your entire workflow and your platform as a recruiting organization. There are a few. There's a couple out there on the enterprise side. I'm even happy to kind of share some of those and name drop for those of you. If anybody, in my personal opinion, the only enterprise, there's only two enterprise grade recruiting CRMs in the entire market. Avature, phenomenal company, big platform, traditional. I would consider it. It's been around for a while. Great platform. It is a true enterprise recruiting CRM. Loxo is much more modern and has the only other enterprise grade, and I think they would agree. But ours is more built into the talent intelligence platform, a bit more modern, different focus. There's a huge litany of different competitors, and they all kind of claim as being a recruiting CRM. They're not. They're more of a sourcing tool. And there's lots of talent management tools now that you kind of like Phenom People or different systems that enterprise companies use, and they're not a recruiting CRM. It's primarily where you start to search and build talent pools and pipelines. And we'll talk a bit more about that.
So, sorry, really want to stop on one thing there. So, you said there's only about 2 true enterprise CRM platforms out there, but there's a number of sourcing tools that claim. So, how are they claiming to be a CRM? What are they missing that is basically saying, they check 2 boxes that put them in this category, but you have to check these other things to really be a true CRM?
People could talk about it, all day long and on paper and on everyone's website, like, oh my God, they have the same exact features, right? Within the recruiting sector and industry, more than any other space, sales professionals, I guess, are the same way. And from the MarTech world, right? You have different tactics and strategies for marketing. The tools that you use to get the job done are really important. And a lot of these sourcing tools, the reason why they're claiming to be a recruiting CRM is because they need to justify their valuation for their investors, but they just throw up some of the basics, like, hey, we have folders. Okay, well then why isn't LinkedIn Recruiter a recruiting CRM, right? CRMs are just very different. Even years ago, they built on top of Salesforce, Job Science, and Talent Rover. And those systems were built on top of it because they didn't have the business development activities for recruiting agencies, right? The problem is it killed their whole business because it didn't help make more placements faster. The recruiting, the bulk of the business, really suffers. So a modern recruiting CRM should be really powerful and robust and do search is critical, building talent pools is critical. A sourcing tool, they're not geared to do this. They have a database full of people. You can tag them and put them in folders, but you can't. It's not enterprise grade. You can't configure it. You can't handle GDPR compliance. You can't set up teams. You can't manage activities and nurture relationships over long time horizons and reporting and on and on and on, right? It's enterprise grade versus this very lightweight, super lightweight sourcing tool. That's not a recruiting CRM.
Perfect. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, and I obviously nerd out about this stuff, but I wanted to just share two specific examples, and this is where people can get a lot of value. So, like, why do I care? Why should we care and have a recruiting CRM? We're fine doing things the way we've always done it. Why would we ever change what we're doing? And here's why. Again, I go back to just from my experience having conversations over the years, if it helps anybody. Most people don't use their system. It's your system of record. It doesn't matter what it's called. Your whole team, your livelihood as a professional recruiter and organization is you have certain job openings to work on, and your livelihood depends on how efficient you are in that and how effective. That's it. And the tools you can use are either job boards or LinkedIn or different places, but those are sourcing tools. And if you have a centralized system with pre-built talent pools, you're not doing it reactively. Instead, you already have, let's say, we'll use 2 specific specializations. So you have physicians, right? There's approximately 1 million active physicians in the US with a doctor of medicine. So if you drill in by specialty, there's a few thousand US physicians per specialty in the whole nation. That's it, right? If you specialize in recruiting this, or that's your whole business, they should all be in your recruiting CRM. And if they're not, like, what are you doing? All you have to do is build relationships with them and nurture them over time and have a history of that. You'll find the very best possible hires per segment, and you'll make a lot more hires. That's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need to pay for fancy tools. I'm sure some people are saying, well, no, no kidding, Matt. That's pretty obvious, but let's take it up to a bigger demographic. So like machine learning engineers. This is an area that everyone's pretty interested in. by 2025, 100% of Fortune 500 companies are all going to have projects in AI industry. And so if you just search by one title, machine learning engineers, there's very few. There's 10,000 globally. With that, 80% of those work in a FANG, right? So most novice recruiters or recruiting teams would say, well, let's just go post and pray and hope these a scarce resource is going to apply to our job and we're in ag tech, right? It's not going to happen. What happens is if you have a recruiting CRM and you go target the top, let's just say 10% of talent in your specialisms or your industry sectors and build relationships with them over time, it doesn't really matter what titles or careers people have. You'll be able to start to, one, you understand and have a history of what they're good at, what type of roles they want, but two, you should be able to leverage kind of more advanced technology to keep that data up to date automatically and predict and infer who the best candidates are and their abilities versus just titles and skill coding, which is how the old world used to be. So it's the CRM allows you to build a talent pool and have them in your system and have a history of them. That's the most important piece. Having that core system of record purpose built for recruitment then allows you to leverage what's coming next and all of the different tools from this, which is where Loxo and we get super fascinated by. But without your core recruiting CRM, it doesn't matter. You're always doing it one at a time and starting from scratch, which is what 99% or 90% of TA and professional recruiting agencies do today.
Which just seems so incredibly inefficient, especially if they had been developing these relationships or anything else. When you were talking about those, 10,000 engineers, one thing that always is incredibly interesting to me, and this is going to slightly veer from CRM, but I think it ties back into it, is things like the knowledge graphs, where if you have those people in your database, you can look at their career trajectories over time too, and then look back at what were the roles before they became that new job title or before they went to that company and do it. And then you can start to use that to predict, okay, I have, 50 software engineers in my database. A lot of those software engineers do end up becoming this type of engineer, making this example up completely. But then you can start to use that to open it up. And if you have those people in your CRM, you're ahead of those 99% of other recruiters who are going, like you said, based on the keywords, current titles, or skills, and not being able to bridge the gap between those two areas.
Yep, completely. And there's a lot of HR tech companies and ATS CRMs that are evolving are starting to use kind of these skill taxonomies and they're talking about it. It's really important. But again, none of this is possible and none of where the whole market's going is possible without that core recruiting CRM. So I think you can't underscore that's the foundation of everything. And most companies, they don't realize that, they haven't invested in that. But yeah, it's exciting to be able to leverage AI on top of that.
Yeah. So I know you've got not a distinct point of view, but you think, I've heard you say recruiting is going to change with technology, and it seems like you have a sense of what is going to lead to this. So would love to hear you expand a little bit on that.
We've been thinking about this and I've been thinking about this for a decade. So, trying to articulate that to everyone and where it's headed has always been a struggle, even though it seems somewhat obvious. But I always go back to that, like, how do people do it today? And everyone thinks they're doing it the same. They're not. And one of our good friends and advisors that I think we've hopefully invited on the show as well is Tim Sackett. And he always says, most people don't know that you're so far ahead of the curve. In what most people are doing is they're still just, posting jobs to job boards and doing that. So when we talk about what's coming, what's happening though is technology is accelerating at a pace where recruiters can no longer sit on the sidelines, right? And so the ones that years beforehand were fine doing the status quo, they're retiring. They're closer to retirement than they are starting their careers. People have to embrace new ways of doing things. Even a very simple thing that we've had for years, drip email automation, it's this entire new category. It's exploded, right? So now recruiters are falling in love and realizing the benefits of using automation to drip sequence candidates. That's still probably adopted by 2% or 2 to 5% of the marketplace, right? And so the things that we're talking about that are coming in a year or two, recruiters have to start to lean into tech. They don't have to, but the ones who do are outperforming the organizations on a scale of 10x. I think you had an example actually that you were thinking about that you wanted to share.
So there was some around, what was it? They moved from a legacy type platform. And then when they had all of this in one area, a good sized team there between, say, 25 to 50 users, have been with us for 6 months. In that time across that team, they have logged over 1 million activities. I did the math because I'm always curious to see how this pans out. So that's between 25 and 35,000 activities per user in that time frame, which equates to just over 4,000 per month and about 225 per day. So they're getting ahead of all these different people, and they either are pulling them in from different source tools, or they're probably adding them into their CRM as well, so they can continue to nurture them, work with them, and everything else. And so when that cascades down, I mean, we look at it from, we were curious and we said, how many placements did you all make this year in this time frame using the Loxo source specifically? They said 15. So that's cold outreach, trying to find people net new. This is a very well-known, established prep firm. I would bet that they're probably making 3 to 5 times that number of hires from their own internal database currently. So when you then have the ability to leverage your recruiting CRM, all of that work that's been done historically, especially think about is as recruiters come and go, you want this historical data there. So if you do hire someone new, if someone retires, anything else, you always have this system of record, like you say. With their placement fees, I mean, you're talking millions of dollars in revenue that they are driving from this, and that's from their own system of record, their own internal CRM. So that's the difference between companies that are going solely outbound. I mean, yeah, you could use Loxosource; it's going to drive incredible results. I mean, they had a 10x return on it there. But if you do use your own internal database, and it's a no brainer. So just I hate the phrase like work smarter, not harder, but it truly is a perfect example of that type of behavior.
Yep, completely. And the fact that example that you shared, without jumping too much into the specifics, they came from one of the most popular platforms, traditional platforms on the market. That is an ATS/CRM, but they make a transition, and within 6 months, 15 placements from a different data source that they previously didn't have access to, that equates to $500,000. That's just an example of one company. I think the other thing, circling back to the question you asked earlier, is about sourcing tools. Within a sourcing tool, you can tag people all day long, but it just goes back to LinkedIn Recruiter, essentially. It's like, how come if every company on the planet uses LinkedIn Recruiter, what is the difference from a recruiting CRM, and why would that not work, essentially? Well, within LinkedIn Recruiter, you're basically, you're locked in, but you can't plug in other tools to it. So you're stuck with LinkedIn, right? You're stuck with the tools that they provide you. With a true open recruiting CRM, you can tie in other systems. And you build your entire end-to-end workflow on top of that. So I just want to underscore how important that is. It's your workflow. The data piece, however, is the gap for most recruiting CRMs. And I think there's 3 pieces to basically a talent intelligence platform, which is talk about. But you have your workflow, you have data, you have AI. To this day, though, the most important tool in software is the recruiting CRM. Data, there's a lot of data out there as commodity. Keeping that up to date and fresh, that's difficult. LinkedIn and other systems have an advantage there, but not as much as they used to. And so all signs basically point back to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and that's where the recruiting CRM is so important. I joke that I continue to walk into this pun, but it was done so brilliantly. In the marketing space, you have a tool like HubSpot, and they do a phenomenal job of connecting all the different tools as a marketer or a sales rep that you would use, and it connects it so you can have all the data flowing back and forth. It's the hub of everything you do. A recruiting CRM is the equivalent of that in the recruiting space. You need that to harness and hold in all of those different inputs, because if you don't, your workflow is going to be broken. You're not going to have the right data in the places that you need it to. And then, I mean, what good is AI if it's not working off of any valuable data? So back to, what's the single most important piece of your tech stack? It's the recruiting CRM. Again, it's not sexy, but it's the fundamental piece that if you set it up properly, that's what will define your success moving forward. I love it. Well, this one was a fun one. It was a deep one. Any last parting thoughts on this one, or should we hang on to those for a future episode?
Yeah, I think we should hang on for it for a future episode. But I'm excited by this. I think a lot of people will be surprised if they actually break down the system and the stack that they use today, I think they would say they actually don't have a recruiting CRM. And again, anybody has an ATS, they can post jobs. Everyone uses sourcing tools. Everyone are using lots of different tools to find contact info, and some are starting to explore AI. But there's no core fundamental recruiting CRM. And really truly ask yourself if you have one, if you can search and mine it easily, you can find people for any search within 10 seconds or less and search and slice and dice that. And if you don't, and you're not able to leverage that, you don't have a recruiting CRM.
I love it. So go out, search. If you can't figure it out in 10 seconds, you've got a different problem to solve for. So Matt, thank you as always for the time. I love these kind of thoughts that you share here. And I know that you sharing this knowledge with us today is really going to inspire recruiters to start incorporating this in their day-to-day and thinking about, do they have what they need to be successful moving forward? So that's it for the show today, everyone. This was a mic drop with Matt. Until next time.
Have a great weekend.